values. The left doesn't want that. Why? Because those values come from where, Joe? A higher power.
That's right.
Joe's pointing up. Big R rights from God. Once that's acknowledged, the left has to give up the idea that the ultimate power in your life is the state. Folks, do not for a second dismiss what I'm telling you. The idea that it's a cultural problem based on values rot will force the left to accept the fact that values and good and evil are real. The left does not want to do that because once they do that, they have to acknowledge the existence of a higher power other than the state. And once you do that, the entire premise of their far left radical argument falls apart because the state is the ultimate power to the leftists. Don't ever forget that. Did I explain that well?
Yeah,
sorry.
You did.
Sometimes people email me; they get annoyed that I always ask you, but you're always good at telling me if we're at rough track.
That was good.
There's a really good article, by the way, I'll put up at Bongino.com at the show notes from Kurt Schlichter, who we had on NRA TV. He's really a very talented writer. He's a lawyer. He was an officer in our military. And he has a piece up at Town Hall, Joe, also about some common misconceptions about the gun debate. It's short. It's very cerebral, though. It's very well written. And just some of the things he hits on, folks, that I'd encourage you to read. In there, he talks about how the process now to get a gun is not unfettered, as some people say. Like the left says, oh, what do you want? Unfettered access to weapons? No, it's fettered, okay? There is still a form you have to fill out, the 4473. He goes through that. But he also talks about the militia and what the Second Amendment means by the militia, what the militia actually is, what it was supposed to mean, and how it's regulated. These are really critical points, he points out. People commonly confuse, the militia with the military. Mm-hmm. They're not the same thing. But check out the piece. It'll be up at the show notes today. He also goes into some other issues on the gun rights debate that I think are really terrific. So it'll be up. It's at townhall.com. It's Kurt Schlichter. So check it out on my website. I'll put it up there under the show notes, Bongino.com. Okay. There's another article I wanted to talk about, which is important because it speaks to, again, the diminution of rights in the country going on right now. And it's not just one, Joe. It's not just the Second Amendment under attack. It's basically multiple amendments, the Bill of Rights under attack at the same time. There's an article up at Cato about the New York Attorney General, this guy Eric Schneiderman, who has been just awful. Right now, think about what's going on, Joe. We have a full-blown attack by the left on the Bill of Rights. And you may say, really? Well, where, Dan? Well, on the First Amendment, we've seen it on college campuses where you have the right, supposedly, to free speech. Well, folks, we know that's not exactly true. It may say it in the Constitution, but it is not being practiced. It is not. If you go on a college campus as a conservative, what the liberals have figured out now is if they get what's called the heckler's veto. What is the heckler's veto? The libs figured out a long time ago that if they can cause enough of a security nightmare for the conservative speaker, riots, they can throw things, literally at Berkeley where they put things on fire, then what do? They create enough of a security situation.
Much of what's going on in Dallas with the
it's a great
NRA.
point. The same things happen with the Dallas Mint. We talked about that the other day.
Yeah.
And it's essentially, that's what it is. Oh, this is going to create protests. So what do? They create extraordinary security costs for these conservative groups, and then they use the security cost as a reason to not allow that person to speak. This is called the heckler's veto. The heckler, the people in there screaming against the group, down with the NRA, or as the billboard said, literally, there was a billboard, kill the NRA, which is disgraceful, by the way. What do? They get a veto over free speech. Now, the whole idea of free speech was not free speech that's comfortable speech, Joe. Comfortable speech, nobody cares about talking about the Yankees or the Mets or the Red Sox. That's not speech anybody wants to limit. Well, maybe if you're a Yankees fan, want to talk about the Red Sox. But, folks, the idea of free speech as enumerated in the Bill of Rights was it was going to cover unpopular speech and all speech, as long as it doesn't, you don't impose a threat on somebody else. I can't call Joe on the phone and tell him I'm going to kill him and repeatedly call him every night. That's under attack on college campuses through the heckler's veto. You have the Fourth Amendment under attack. We've seen it with the Obama administration, with Obamagate, with the spy scandal, where unquestionably we've seen the right to privacy in your papers and in your documents. We've seen that go out the window, folks. The conversation about metadata and your metadata and the government accumulating it and using it against you seems to have gone out the window. Yeah. We saw it with the unmasking cases, with the repeated use of the FISA court to spy against people who were not secure in their personal conversations, were not secure in their personal items and their personal papers and their business dealings. Folks, this is very real. This is happening. It's not hyperbolic. We're not making things up. We're not exaggerating for effect. This is happening right now. The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. We've seen this attack over the Second Amendment continue as well. And the attack over the control of your own personal safety and security through the ownership of a firearm, if you so choose. Yeah. Why am I bringing this up in terms of the Cato piece and Eric Schneiderman? Because this guy is at war with the Constitution in New York, and he's out of control. What did he do? He's now demanding access to a conservative group, Citizens United, to their donor list. Now, folks, this is a big deal. This is not a joke. He wants access to the list. Now, why does he want access to the list? Well, he's a liberal Democrat, and Citizens United is a group. He wants access to who the New York donors are to this group. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Citizens United is probably most famous for the Supreme Court case where they produced a movie about Hillary Clinton. It was not a more flattering portrayal, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that was deemed basically free speech, that could come out before an election, and it could be funded by certain organizations who could pay for things like that. So really the right to freely associate with other companies and give your money to companies and to have freedom of speech as an entity was defended. Citizens United, though, is under attack because Schneiderman, what they want to do, Joe, is they want to grab a hold of these donors. Now, of course, Joe, they'll say, don't you worry. We will keep all of this quiet. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened when the Obama IRS got a hold of the list of the opponents to gay marriage and people in California where it was, Joe, leaked. And all of a sudden, these people became targets for public harassment and ridicule. He's doing it again, folks. This is another battle against things like the right to be to freely associate with others, the right to not be subjected to government coercion in your private associations. I mean, these are the this is a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach, and this is what frightens me about liberalism every day. And this is why on the show I focus on with Joe all the time big R rights, the bigger 30,000-foot picture here outside of just the gun issue. Because I'm telling you, folks, to the people out there who are maybe self-defined as moderate Democrats who say, well, I believe in the right to free speech and the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination. I get it. I believe in all of that. But, having a gun and owning a gun is different. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not. These rights are inextricably linked. If you believe in the right to speak, you have to believe in the right for you to defend your right to speak as well. These are the things that matter. This is under attack on multiple levels. Please read this piece in Cato. It is so deeply disturbing about what Schneiderman's up to in New York, because this is what they want to do. Now, they're going to have a really tough time. The Second Circuit Court, apparently they lost the case on that, but I'm hoping the Supreme Court takes this up. But one of the issues that comes up in there is a Supreme Court case back in the civil rights era, Joe. The right to keep your donor list private was upheld. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting, and I'm speaking to our liberal friends right now, what's interesting is I mentioned the civil rights era for a reason. You know what case that was? It was the NAACP versus Alabama. At the time, segregated Alabama wanted to get a hold of the NAACP donor list. Well, why do you think they would want that at that time? Folks, it may not have been for the most benevolent philanthropic means.
You think?
The NAACP won that case. Yeah. So this is why I'm frustrated, because I'm begging our liberal friends and our liberal listeners, and I know we have them. I'm begging you to please open your eyes and understand what's going on. The very same arguments, the very same things that you were afraid of back there in the civil rights era, the encroachment of government into de jure racial segregation, the encroachment of government into your civil liberties to live because you happen to be black. These liberties are all intertwined. And the fact that some of those same tactics are being used now to go after political opponents, again, not to be fair, this is not based on race. Jim Crow is a very unique, horrible time in our history. But the strategy, Joe, that's the point I'm trying to make. Mm-hmm. The strategy is the exact same to go after people based on politics, not skin color. Right. Be afraid. Be very afraid. No, this is why we need to stay organized and fight back, folks. It matters. All right, a couple more stories. But today's show also brought to you by our buddies at My Patriot Supply. Hey, folks, preparedness matters. So I know I've confused you, but we'll throw it in there, right?
All right.
Preparedness matters. My prior line of work, preparedness was everything. It was everything we did. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to have an emergency food supply. We insure everything in our lives that matters. We insure our teeth, our health, your car, your home. Insure your food supply. Go to preparewithdan.com. That's preparewithdan.com. Sorry, I'm throwing Joe for a loop right now. I'll explain to you another time. Preparewithdan.com and pick up your 1 month supply of emergency food today. Preparewithdan.com. That's preparewithdan.com. I have like 8 to 10 boxes of this stuff in my house alone because I live in a hurricane zone and you just never know when the supply chain of food is going to get interrupted. Go check it out. Preparewithdan.com. All right. Getting back to the content. Interesting piece, by the way, about this is. I read this and I was pretty much blown away because I'm fascinated, Joe, with facts and data and economic numbers, and opinions are great, but sooner or later you're going to have to back it up. And I said as much on Hannity on Wednesday night. I don't know if you saw the appearance, you all out there, but he asked me, when I thought basically the media was going to come around to the first year success of the Trump team on the economy. And I said, Sean, it's going to have to be soon because the numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. People lie. You can have an opinion, a negative opinion, but you can't have an opinion about what the numbers are. In other words, Joe, the point I was trying to make to Sean is we measure economic growth, unsurprisingly, by growth, GDP, gross domestic product. That's how we measure growth. In other words, what we produce. And when what we produce grows in amount and quality and quantity, we're growing as an economy. You grow by producing more medicine, more cars, more shale oil, more iPhones, more rare earth minerals. This is how you grow. The Obama numbers were historically bad. The average Obama growth rate of 2% was horrifying. He's the first president in modern American history to not reach 3% growth, folks. Think about what I'm telling you. He's the first president in modern American history to not reach 3% economic growth in any 1 year of his presidency. Now, he had reached it in quarters, but that's not typically how we do it. You measure it annually. He never reached an annual growth rate of 3%. That is so deeply disturbing. Think about how some of the horrible presidents we've had on the economy, Jimmy Carter, even they did it. But not Barack Obama.
Yeah.
He didn't get there.
It sucks.
The numbers don't lie. They never lie. And they're going to have a hard time because Trump is now pushing towards this because we haven't had a full year yet of measurable growth for him because they met the way the economic, the government measures it. They don't go by calendar year. So we're not there yet. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the next quarter. But Trump, I think, is going to break that 3% mark his first time out of the chute. But here's an interesting piece from the Wall Street Journal today. It's subscriber only, but I'll read it to you. It's fascinating. The Jason Furman, who was an Obama economic guy, I cite him frequently on the show for. Well, I don't cite him. We usually talk about him to to tell you how wrong he is, right? Is that right, Joe? Is that a good way to say it? I'm trying to be nice, you know. But Furman writes a lot in the Wall Street Journal, even as a liberal economist, and he writes things I think are just not accurate. Again, I'm trying to be really nice. But he took a shot at the Trump team for their overly rosy. Because this is funny. This gets better. Recently in the Journal, he took a shot at the Trump team for their, Joe, overly optimistic views of growth in the economy. Keep in mind, I just told you the economy's growing at a faster rate than Obama. Those are the numbers. Whether you agree with them or not is irrelevant. This is a great piece from the Journal, though. He's calling out, James Freeman is calling out Furman about numbers. In other words, he's saying, this is ironic that you're attacking the Trump team for overly optimistic estimations of the numbers. Let's go into what your estimations were. This is good from the piece. He's calling out reporters now, Freeman, too. He says, specifically, reporters may want to consult Table S9 in the economic report Mr. Trump released last May. This is great. The press will note that the president and his economic team predicted 2.3% real economic growth for the calendar year 2017. Remember, calendar years, that's not the way the government works. But so the Trump team, just to be clear, Furman is saying, the Obama guy is saying, hey, the Trump team is way too optimistic with their estimations. Right. So Freeman says, really? Because that's funny. If you look at the Trump estimate released last May, they predicted 2.3%. Well, what was it, Joe? If the Trump team is crazy, they should have been way off. Yeah. Well, continuing to quote Freeman, based on the current reading from the Commerce Department released last month, The Trump forecast was right on the money.
Yeah.
Wow. This is what I meant when I told